I'd like to call this meeting of the Carson City Historic Resources Commission for Thursday, May 14th, 2020, at the Community Center Sierra Room to order. Just as a notice to the public, the meeting is somewhat restricted due to the pandemic and Governor's declaration of emergency. If you're watching on if you're streaming, the meeting is slightly delayed. If you would like to call in and make a public comment, you can join by phone in live time. That number is 408-418-9388. The access code is 965-575-709, and it's available on the city website with the agenda items. Please call the roll.
Chairperson Drews.
Here.
Vice Chair Darney.
Here.
Commissioner Block.
Here.
Commissioner Hayes.
Here.
Commissioner Schmitter.
Here.
Commissioner Schmidt. Commissioner Spielda.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. Any members of the public who wish to comment on either agendized or non-agendized items may do so. We request that you keep your comments short, and preferably we'd like to have comments at the end of the meeting item, but you're free to comment now if you'd like. Is there any public comment?
I see no public comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to C for possible action. We have approval of minutes from the March 12th, 2020 meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the meeting minutes from the March 12th meeting.
A motion, do I have a second?
A second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Modification of the agenda, I think after talking with Hope, we can take it just as it's presented, unless commission members have some preference. Hearing none, we'll go to item E, meeting items. HRC-E1, HRC-2020-013 for possible action, discussion, and possible action regarding providing input regarding a Section 106 review being conducted by the U.S. Forest Service relative to the reconstruction of Kings Canyon Road, beginning at the Kings Canyon Trailhead and going westerly for 2.2 miles on property zone conservation reserve and owned by the United States of America, APNs 007-061-2641, 007-051-87 and 02. Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have up on the screen a map which has a starting point, which is the Kings Canyon Trailhead, and an end point, which is about 2.2 miles west of the Kings Canyon Trailhead. The Forest Service is preparing to pursue the reconstruction project on this portion of Kings Canyon Road. Since this is a federal project, a Section 106 review will be required to identify and assess the effect that the project will have on historic and cultural resources. This is a scoping session, as the HRC is a consulting agency. Kaylee Cruz, the district archaeologist for the Forest Service, is on the phone, and she will walk us through the project. The purpose of this item is for the commissioners to provide input to the Forest Service on resources that should be considered in preparing this impact analysis. Desi, do we have Kaylee on the phone?
Yes, she's on the line.
Yes, I'm on the phone.
Kaylee, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. Real quickly, I'd give some background on the road itself. Most of you are probably familiar with Kings Canyon Road. It starts in Carson City, downtown, goes west, and ends at Spooner Summit. And the first 2 miles through town until you hit the trailhead are paved, and then from the Kings Canyon or Waterfall Trailhead, it turns to dirt, and that's where this project is going to take place. And really, there was maintenance done on it in the early mid 90s, and there has been a lack of maintenance since then. And really, this project is going to clean the inside ditches, put in drainage features, repair drainage features like rolling dips and water bars and culverts, and bring in fill to fill in the places where it's downgraded. This road isn't ideally located. It goes through a meadow, and which creates a lot of issues related to erosion. And so several attempts have been made to record and evaluate this segment as well as other segments of the road. And so our current undertaking will take into account all of the past maintenance, all of the recording efforts and evaluations, and make an eligibility call or confirm any previous eligibility determinations, and then an adverse effects determination or an effects determination. At this time, Carson City Open Space is the project proponent, and they secured funding to hire a third-party contractor to do the Section 106 report, and then we would submit it to the State Historic Preservation Office. My preliminary thoughts, based on what I've seen, is that it would be a no adverse effects determination. And so as an interested party and folks who have obviously put some time and money into this resource, we're interested in any comments or input you may have on those preliminary thoughts.
Thank you, Kaylee. Are there any commission member questions or comments regarding this?
I'd like to make a couple comments, if you don't mind. I'm Rob Darney. I for some time lived in Kings Canyon, right near the top where the trailhead begins. And I actually appreciated what they did in the 90s as far as erosion control and with the passable dips, I guess they call it, in the lower part of that section of road. And as a homeowner at that time, it wasn't about the erosion control. Obviously, I wasn't thinking in those terms. It was more about that's a favorite spot for, all the kids and the hooligans in town to head up. And having those dips and the drainage and all the repair work that they had done had really reduced a lot of that, because you just don't get the high-speed racing and things like that were occurring on that road. And I'd like to see more of that and have it be restored so that can be maintained, because it's a real problem for the people that live up there. And to have it well-maintained and diversified as far as it not being a straight run like they had previously, I support completely.
Thanks, Rob. Any other questions or comments? Bill, your speaker's on.
Sorry.
No, you were on.
This is Luann. Didn't we do a study of that section of the road? Is that the Section 106 report that they're talking about? Or?
No, Terry Burke did a Section 106 report. If I may, Kaylee, Terry Burke did one for road improvements in '94, I believe. We used Charles Zier to spend some CLG funds to kind of do a historic overview and a kind of a Section 110 on, I think it was the section north of that in 2014. So together, between the Zier and the Burke report, the inventory and evaluation has been done, and I believe Rebecca Palmer actually was one of the first people when she was with the Forest Service to work on that alignment as well. So
That's correct. The most western part.
And Kaylee, all the work is within the current road prism, is that correct, or pretty close to that? You're not straying too far off the
Pretty
current
close.
path?
Yeah, we have to do a couple additional lead outs. So getting the water off the road. But for the most part, I think that 95% of it is repairing the existing road prism.
Any other questions or comments? Kaylee, my only comments are covered by both the Burke and Zaire report, as long as you guys are paying attention to the features and sites that were found on there, in those reports. I think we're good to go. And I agree with your assessment that there'd be no adverse effect.
Yeah, and if for some reason it looks like we're going in an adverse effects determination, I have quite a few ideas and opportunities. Even if we don't go in an adverse effects determination, there are a lot of opportunities to mitigate potential adverse effects, like interpretation and educational material. So,
Yeah, the trailhead,
Yeah.
the trailhead at the end of King Street gives us a great opportunity. And I think we can probably find some CLG funds too, if you want to cooperate on some more interpretation for up there too. So when we get done with this, we can
Yeah.
talk and maybe work together for that. Is there any
sounds
other?
good. And then also just one more thing, I guess. They are building a new trailhead. The Forest Service, Carson City, and the Federal Highways Administration are building a new trailhead up there. And so there is going to be that opportunity. And I would be interested in pursuing that with you guys.
Yeah, that'd be great. Do you have any idea what the status of the multiple properties documentation is that NDOT was doing?
It's still in draft form.
Okay.
Like that.
Is there any other commission member questions or comments? Is there any public comment on this item?
I see no public comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, we're not allowed to use the HPF funds for interpretation.
We might be able to play with some, we can figure out a way that we can work with Forest Service on something there. There are other segments. I think there's one remaining segment of the road that we may need to do some research on that we might be able to help with. I'll entertain a motion.
You're just
This was
providing
just guidance?
input because
Okay.
it's a scoping session, so I guess your input is to focus on those two reports that you referenced.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, well, thank you, Kaylee.
Yep. You're welcome. Thank you.
Next item is E2 HRC-2020-010 for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding a Section 106 technical report prepared due to federal permitting for a 100-foot monopole on property zoned general commercial and located at 4209 South Carson Street, APN 009-125-24. Oh,
Okay, this is a 100-foot cell tower behind Burlington Coat Factory. Since the tower requires permitting through the FCC, a Section 106 review is required to identify and assess the effect the project will have on historic and cultural resources. A cultural resource assessment was completed, and it's in your packet, and it concluded that the proposed project will not result in an effect to historic, architectural, or archaeological resources. As a consulting agency, the commission is invited to review this document and comment on it. Sean Simpson, the consulting archaeologist from Environmental Assessment Specialist, I believe is on the phone. Desi, is Sean on the phone?
Yes, Sean's with us.
And he can give you an overview of his report if you'd like. Sean, the floor is yours.
Sean, can you hear us?
Yes, no, I'm sorry, it was muted earlier. I can hear you fine.
Sean, would you like to give an overview of your report and your conclusion?
I did a record search and there are 5 historic properties within a half mile. They're single-story residential units with visibility limitations. I don't believe you can see this proposed cell tower from those locations. Does anybody have any questions?
Is there any commission member questions or comments?
This is Rob Darney. I'm just trying to get a grip on the actual location of this based on that site plan and what I'm seeing here as a large plan.
What I've given you is just, it's a vicinity map.
Burlington Coat Factory and that little skinny strip between the property
Right,
line and the
and-
back of the building.
Right, so if you drive behind the shopping center, you have different stores, and
Yeah.
this is behind Burlington Coat Factory. And if you go down there, if you stand back there, it's a loading area. And if you look to the east, it drops down a lot. It drops down really severely there, and you have a vacant lot. And then there are some homes, I believe, on Silver Sage.
Do we know what zoning that vacant lot is?
I don't recall. The cell tower is allowed. It has gone to the planning commission and obtained a special use permit. This is just comment on the section 106 review.
Okay.
but-
My only concern would be if that's a residential zoning.
Again, a special use permit was approved, so in terms of the use has been approved by the planning commission. This is just a review, impacts to historic or cultural resources.
Okay.
Greater
I
Nevada
have
is just northeast of that, Rob, so I'm assuming that the block from Silver Sage to Carson Street, or to the back of Burlington is all commercial.
Yeah.
And it's residential surrounding that, but.
I have a question. It's actually, the fence that it's enclosing is actually attached to the back of the building.
Right.
Yeah, because we looked at it, because we're right across the street. We don't have any problem with it, so.
Okay. Half of it.
Lou?
Sean, in your assessment of visual effects, APE, we pulled the tax parcel map, and there are some properties that date to 1960s that were not included in your report as far as assessing whether they're historic properties or not. So I was wondering if you had any comment on those properties rather than just the ones that had been previously recorded.
Can you hear me? No, I just assessed the ones in the database.
Could you repeat that, Sean?
I only assessed the properties within the visual view that were in the state recorded database. And that's all there was. I'm sure there's a lot more historic stuff around there, but that's all they're required to address.
Sean, this is Mike. You say you consulted the assessor's records? Those properties are
Just
all,
for the immediate parcel.
well, this is within your half-mile view shed. And these are parcels that are directly adjacent to the cell tower site. So these are, generally what you need to do for visual effects is look at adjacent parcels at a minimum, because those will have the greatest chance of having a visual effect. And there's a number of parcels surrounding that are constructed in the early 60s.
It's generally outside the scope of work. We could do an expanded search and include that if that's what part of the comments are necessary.
Okay, because the scope of work, it sounded to me like the scope of work was that half-mile radius that you did the record search on, and I'm not sure what SHPO told you or how they directed you for visual effects, but your photographs are all within that half-mile radius, so I would assume that most adjacent properties are included.
Not that I'm aware of, but I suppose we should or could include those.
Okay,
I think the resources haven't been previously recorded, so you would be the first one that would be doing the identification effort within this indirect APE on the 1960s resources.
Right, there could be hundreds or thousands of parcels within a half mile that could potentially searched.
No, Sean, you can kind of limit your visual effects search to adjacent properties. I think you've demonstrated that there's sufficient screening in that half-mile buffer. And I've done a number of projects in the built environment, and SHPO pretty much requires that you look at least adjacent parcels to see how old they are and whether they meet the age criteria.
Okay.
The information that we have, there's 5 buildings that are in the 1960s that are directly within line of sight to the cell tower. They're the closest properties. The other ones that are previously recorded are actually behind these properties, which makes me just a little bit concerned about the visual effects on those properties and that they haven't been addressed.
There's a variety of photos from those properties back towards the proposed location, and the Burlington Code Factor, everything's just really not visible.
Sean, this is Mike. I just drove by today, and every property that is immediately adjacent to that site on Clearview and on Silver Sage is within direct line of sight of that tower. And that's where those 1960s properties are. I would suggest you call the Nevada State Museum and get a copy of the Ross Gold report that I did, and that'll show you the format that SHPO is more than comfortable with in dealing with the adjacent properties. I think the issue we have is that your report doesn't address at least 5 properties that were constructed in the 1960s and meet the National Register age criteria. Michelle, do you have anything?
I just agree with what you're requesting. I think it should be reevaluated to include those buildings.
I just have a question. This isn't for our approval. We're not making a motion. This is just information to us so we can recommend that they go back, but we have no recourse here. It's already been approved.
Okay, the land use has been approved. You are not reviewing land use. You are a consulting agency on the Section 106 report. So Sean has prepared this report. This commission has reviewed the report. And what I'm hearing is that some commissioners find the report to be inadequate because it failed to look at the impact on properties constructed in the 1960s, which would have an indirect impact. If that's how the entire or majority of the commission feels, then what we would do is we would prepare a letter that advised that we've reviewed, that the HRC has reviewed the report as a consulting agency and would like the report to be modified to analyze properties constructed in the 1960s that meet that 50-year threshold and in the evaluation of the indirect impact of these properties and a determination of whether these properties may qualify for the National Register. So
That's
you're
what I was trying to get at.
commenting.
We don't have an action that we can take here, but we can request that the report be updated to include the historical properties that you're discussing. I just want to make sure, because when we first started for possible action, we have no action here except to direct staff to write the letter she just
Well, it's going to be your thoughts. I mean, I'll actually write it, but it's your thoughts. And what I'll say is that the commission reviewed the report, and it's the position of the commission that, and I'm sure people who are experts, which is not me, will give me the exact wording I should be using, but it will be essentially, if it's what the majority thinks, that those structures that are more than 50 years old, that haven't been evaluated, but do have an indirect impact, be evaluated, and it be determined whether or not there's an adverse impact and what the mitigation should be.
I'll say something. I agree with all that, and I think that I'd use the word, we feel it's incomplete without including those properties. And maybe we specify those 5 specific properties, or we just leave it as adjacent properties.
Yeah, I think does not adequately address would take care of that, and what we're looking for is eligibility determination and determination of effect based upon that expanded, the results of that expanded search. That doesn't necessarily mean, Sean, that you have to do a evaluation of each property. You can treat them as eligible and then address the effects or visual effects.
Would that be the properties immediately adjacent or those that are potentially visible?
I usually go with potentially visible, but in this case, there's enough vegetation there that I think if you looked at there's 2 parcels on Rovatini, between Rovatini and Clearview. And I believe there's a couple more. Yeah, there's a couple on Center. If you pull up the parcel maps, you can kind of look at the built environment that surrounds the tower location. And if you pick the parcels that are pretty much have a clear view, that are adjacent to those properties, that would have a direct line of sight, those would be the ones to look at. There's that property to the northeast that was all developed in the 1990s. I don't think you need to bother with that. But that area between Silver Sage and Clearview, Rovatini, there's a lot of 1960s development right in there that can see the shopping center and would see that tower. Is there any other commission member questions or comments? Is there any public comment on this item?
I see no public comment, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Desi. In that case, can we just hope to put a letter together? You understand the concerns, Sean?
Yes.
Okay, well, hope we'll put a letter together then, copy you.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
Ben Johnson, Deputy Attorney for the record, sorry. If we're going to direct staff, and if there is a consensus, if we could just have a motion, I think it would be appropriate.
okay. In that case, I'll entertain a motion.
All right. The motion for HRC 2020-0010 for possible action and for the cell tower review of the Section 106 report, the HRC finds the finding is that the report is not adequate in addressing the 1960s houses that are directly adjacent to the new tower location, and we're directing staff to put together a letter to conform with the standards of Section 106 in review.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Lou. Motion, second, Don. Any questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Sean. Next item is E3, HRC-2020-011, for possible action, discussion, and possible action regarding a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors regarding a request for an historic tax deferment on properties owned residential office, RO, located at 204 Minnesota Street, APN 003-192-09. Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This request is due to a change of ownership. The subject building was constructed in 1883. Per the survey, the structure represents one of the city's most interesting and carefully executed architectural designs and reflects the stone building tradition so important to the city. The property is a contributing property in the West Side Historic District. The property is included in the city's surveys, is in good repair, and alterations have been subject to review by the HRC for compliance with the guidelines for the historic district and with the Secretary of the Interior guidelines. Staff is recommending that you recommend approval of this tax deferment to the Board of Supervisors. I have advised the property owner he did not need to participate in tonight's meeting because this really was a change of ownership, and I didn't think it would be necessary. So if there's any concern of him not participating, I'll own that. Thank you.
Thank you, Hope. Any
Question.
I have-
You
oh.
mentioned tax, you mentioned
I'm sorry, no, there was some confusion with the agenda, and the chair and I are using the hard copy agenda, I believe. It may be, or maybe it was the agenda that was online, sorry about that. So we're on 512 North Nevada. I'm sorry, no, we aren't. We are on 204 Minnesota, which is what the paper says that's at your seat.
If you look at the, it's 2020-0011.
Thank you.
So I have a question, because if we move forward with the deferment, which we've had these discussions with the garages. My office used to be in this building too, but it's in the new part in the back that was obviously not constructed in the 1800s. It was constructed probably in the 90s, 1990s. Would that be deferred, or would it be similar to what we do with these other buildings where that's not a part of the deferment, it's just the historic portion of the building that is?
Yeah, good question. I think, I didn't see in the assessor's records where it was treated separately. Having said that, the assessor, or I think it's fair for, in your making a recommendation to the board, for you to recognize that the addition is a 1990s addition and should not be included in the deferment. And I'm happy between this meeting and the board meeting to talk to the tax assessor to see if that's something he can accommodate in the tax, issuing the tax bill.
The only reason I bring that up is so that everybody is treated fairly, since, and as Hope has explained, this is because of the computer and it's easier for the assessor to start to split these buildings up. And we've had people that we've come in and we've been very specific going, okay, the historic one gets a deferment, the one in the back that you built doesn't. And I think we have to be fair with everybody. So that's the only thing I want to be cautious about.
The way I see it, Don, it's attached. I don't see, when we're dealing with accessory structure, we can detach that, or it's obviously detached. The addition is attached. It's actually, 15 years ago, I took the National Trust representative around a tour of the district, and I pointed that addition out to her as the most effective use of solar panels in an historic district that I'd ever seen. And
They covered up my skylight to put those up there.
And in this case, I think that addition is exactly what we're looking for. on historic buildings and the best way to accommodate some kind of solar structure. So I can see in this case specifically, keeping the entire building as part of the assessment.
Okay, but you understand my concern. Okay, I just,
No, that,
I worry
I,
about people feeling like, oh, wait, what just happened here?
I think it's going to be important for us to clarify and try to be consistent about how we do this. If this was a poorly designed and poorly implemented addition, then I think we could rightfully make the case that we need to do something else.
See, now I have a problem with that comment, though. I mean,
I think
who says it's a good addition or a bad addition architecture to that? But if I like the concept that you said, okay, it's a detached building, it's easy to separate. If it's an attached building, then we include it in the recommendation for deferment. I just hate leaving it arbitrary, for decision-making. Not everybody's as good at this as you are, and then we leave that open 5 years from now.
So maybe what we do on these applications is we look at accessory structures. If we decide that the accessory structure is an important part of the property, we can include that, and if not, we don't.
Yeah, my only comment is, because my garage is attached by a bridge or a breezeway, that should not be considered attached for our purpose for the tax deferment. That maybe X amount of the
It'd be
building is
based on the same
attached.
thing the building department would consider it attached or not, really, I think.
I think you need to go back to the findings and to the criteria that's established in code. And it includes that the property must have significance or be listed. Okay, so we start there. And we know that, and we just reviewed it or we're going to review it in the next item, that we have our survey for the National Register on the west side, and it's identified all the buildings, including accessory buildings, as contributing and non-contributing. And maybe you start thinking in those terms, is this contributing versus non-contributing? It has to be in good repair. Any alteration, which I think alterations would include additions, have to be of compatible historic character, and the property must be in compliance with the Historic Resource Commission guidelines. So I think if you look at those and you're looking at the outbuildings as well as the additions, and you're looking at this criteria, this criteria should guide your decision-making.
I like that. Can I make a motion?
Can I say one more thing?
Not yet.
I agree with that. I also agree with what Don's concerns were, and my concerns are shared that this is a historic residence, and the addition predominantly is being used commercial. Therefore, my thought is it was added there not to gain significance to the historic house. It's been put there for monetary gain by the owners. It's not, the purpose of building the addition was not to live in and make the house better. It was for monetary gain, to gain square footage for leasing. So is that the same thing? Is a guy putting a new
Rob,
master bedroom on his historic house?
Rob, there's plenty
Same.
of commercial residential buildings in the district. I mean, part of the incentive part of the reason for this incentive was so that if you owned a business and wanted to use one of these old houses,
Right.
you could.
And I
So-
get that.
So I don't see that use has as much to do with it as maintenance and ongoing care.
Then you have to be strictly consistent then, which means,
And that building is fluctuated, Rob. When I know that they're using it as residence now, but when I was in there, the whole building was,
and I have no problem with how. they're
Day
using it,
Williams was in there. I mean, there wasn't any residence component at that point. So this has been a building, I love this building.
I guess I guess there's just a question of precedence. If we approve this, then we're pretty much approving everything else. And you mentioned if it's something that's unsightly or ghastly to us, then it probably shouldn't have been approved in the first place. And why are we the ones getting it dumped on? I don't see in other words, I don't see that being a factor of us denying one if we approve this one.
Denying,
In other words, it's not our purview to judge the architecture of that, the architectural style or if it's, pleasing to the public.
No, I think Hope's right. We have criteria that we need to consider, and if the building meets that, regardless of whether it's residential, it's office residential, or commercial, if we use those criteria and the building meets it, then we should, or building and accessory structures, the property, we can have our findings based on that.
And if I can
Fine,
just
I just wanted to voice there's a little fringe concerns.
There's also an example, and at the end of this, we'll have staff reports, but the chair, from time to time, will approve a shed that's not visible from off-site. Should that shed receive the deferment? But because it wasn't necessarily meeting the design standards of the district because it wasn't visible and wasn't going to have an impact. So I think you really need to look case by case, and you need to look at this criteria.
Any other commission member questions, comments? Michelle?
I was just going to say that if we were going to review this as an addition today, there would be modifications because there are impacts to at least one character defining feature. I'm just putting that out there. I think it was well done at the time, but I was kind of moving towards what Don was saying about making sure we're consistent, but I understand the guidelines that we're looking at for the deferment. And there's some good questions that have come up with this one item that do we all feel comfortable moving forward with making these deferments as we have? I know we're agreed to saying this isn't, an addition isn't an accessory dwelling, so it's part of this building, so it's not going to be counted separately, because I doubt the assessor would do that. But it does also give us an opportunity to say, is this meeting the criteria for deferment? And I think we are in agreement that it does. But what I'm suggesting is that if this was an addition today, we might be looking at it a little differently, make sure the impacts to the character defining feature, just the eve return mainly is what I'm thinking about, was handled with not like a hyphen between the main building and the addition. That's what we would be looking at. Neither here nor there, but I'm just putting it out there.
Okay.
I also think that the reason we're having this discussion is because this particular parcel, this is a sizable addition compared to most additions. And that one kind of raised the eyebrow of, we ought to take a second look and have this conversation.
Well, the bottom line is, when that addition was put on, we did approve it. And we've pretty much, Michelle's right. If we were doing it now, we'd say something, we'd have some other criteria. But what we're looking at now is an open space deferment. We're looking at whether it has significance. Obviously, it does. It's in great shape. And alterations are compatible with the historic character. So that's where we are on it. And, we can't go back 20 years and rethink the addition. So is there any other commission member questions or comments? Is there any public comment on this item?
I see no public comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. Did you want to ask if the applicant had any questions? Oh. I move to recommend to the Board of Supervisors approval of HRC-2020-0011 based on the findings that the request is consistent with the design guidelines for the historic district and the Secretary of the Interior standards as noted in the staff report.
The motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries
Aye.
unanimously. Oops, you need to be faster, Michelle. E4, HRC-2020-009 for possible action, discussion, and possible action regarding request to remove an outbuilding, modify a front porch, replace fencings at property zoned residential office, RO, located at 512 North Nevada Street, APN 003-221-02. Hope.
Thank you. The applicant is seeking to remove an outbuilding, modify the front porch, and replace fencing at the subject property. The subject property is known as the Child's House. Per SHPO, was constructed in 1864. On April 11th, the property owner demolished an outbuilding on the property and over the next few days removed fencing and began work on a porch. The city stopped the work and directed the property owner to apply to the HRC for all exterior work. In terms of the demolition, this is a picture from Google Street View of what the building that was demolished. Per Municipal Code 1806, it tells you how to handle demolitions in the historic district. And I'm just going to read it short. It says, any application for demolition or removal of a cultural resource located in a historic district shall be approved when the HRC finds that one or more of the following. A cultural resource is a hazard to public health or safety, and repairs or stabilization are not feasible as determined by a professional with demonstrated experience in historic preservation, rehabilitation projects. Or B, the cultural resource does not meet the National Register significance criteria. The applicant has advised that the building was a safety hazard and that repairs were not feasible. The applicant has provided photographs to show the condition of the building before demolition, and I'll show you those photographs. They're in your packet as well. That's the roof, the rear. 2 pictures of the interior. I'll leave that for a minute so you can see the ceiling and the walls. Another interior picture where you can see the ceiling. An exterior picture. It is unknown when this outbuilding was constructed. There's no evidence of building permits for the building. However, the National Register nomination for the West Side Historic District, prepared in 2011, identifies the early 20th century garage as a contributing building. If the commission agrees with the applicant regarding the condition of the building, the commission may approve the demolition. In terms of fencing, there's one more picture of the building. Outbuilding?
The building's gone now, though, right?
Yes. There was fencing along the northern property line, which I'm showing there. And the applicant's actually proposing to replace that fencing and extend it to the western property line, 6-foot solid wood fencing. The applicant's also proposing to run fencing from the house to the southern property line. He had requested 3-foot tall fencing, solid wood, but he's now would like it to be taller to hide his trash bins. In terms of the development standards for fencing, neither of these fences would compromise the primary view of the building, and both fences would utilize wood, an acceptable material in the district. Per the development standards 1.12.5A, the 6-foot fence along the northern property line would need to be set back 5 feet from property line, which is back of sidewalk. So it couldn't be sitting right on top of the sidewalk. It would need to be set back 5 feet. In terms, I'll just show you, this is the house prior to the work being done. In terms of the porch, the applicant is proposing to retain the horizontal piece of wood that's on top of the stucco and to remove the vertical pieces of wood that are on top of the horizontal piece. This would allow the porch to function more like an open-air porch. It is not known what the original porch looked like. The proposed modification will significantly retain the character of the building and will not substantially change the appearance of the building consistent with the guidelines. I believe Doug Brower is on the phone. He is the applicant.
I am.
I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you. And Mr. Brower, I'm sure, can speak to the commission about his thoughts on this property.
Yes, I'm here, Hope.
Would you like to speak to the commissioners?
Actually, I feel that you've presented my request in a very succinct and straightforward. All I would propose would be just a compromise between a 3-foot and the 6-foot along that southern border there. Presently, you'll find that I put in the 4x4s initially in order to set up the proper spacing and etc. They actually look a little intimidating because they were a lot longer than we needed. And just to create a nice fence that still allows the view toward the back of the property, the side of the house, but still hides that trash can. It originally was stored on the front porch, which I don't think is very presentable. And guiding the idea that it goes to that side of the home for trash removal made sense to facilitate something in that area. And the fencing along the north side actually encroached very closely to the sidewalk, not allowing, if a couple were walking, to be able to walk side by side. So I have already set that fence even further than that easement so that it allows a little more room on the sidewalk for people to be able to just continue walking on their way. My neighbor behind me would like to carry on the same pickets and the same fence so that it all looks equally conformative down through there. And that, I think, pretty well presents my request.
Thank you, Mr. Brower. Are there any commission member questions or comments?
Can you just clarify where the
No, I'm just happy to
shorter
be-
fence on the south side is going to be relative to the street, let's say? How, are we running
It will run from the house.
from the house to the
to the
southern?
southern property
edge.
line, so it won't be any closer to the sidewalk than the
Okay.
house is.
Actually, it's 36 feet from the road. So it's partway back from the house, and it'll allow the gas company to be able to read the meter without having to go into the backyard and, those concerns. So it'll be a lot quicker and easier for the, municipalities to take care of things. But it's quite a ways from the sidewalk. I don't know exactly, but 36 feet from the road.
So
This is going to cover a couple things I want to bring up. I think the application is incomplete. I have drawings with little arrows on it. I have black and white photos. I don't have a site plan that we require from everybody else. I don't have a clear visual description of what we're trying to do here. And that's what we require from everybody. I think, generally from the discussion, probably something we'll never have a problem with, but to me, it's incomplete, and I would have to vote no on this one.
I agree completely. Took the words right out of my mouth. No offense to you, Mr. Brower. It's more of a question of we really shouldn't be accepting an incomplete packet without a site plan, because I really am spun around here. I don't know which way, front, side streets facing what. I can't tell. I mean, I did drive by there. I do have an understanding of it. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we require it from everyone else to turn in a proper site plan so that everyone has clear understanding of the orientation, the views from the street, the views from the adjacent property owners. And I agree with Don. I think this is incomplete and we should continue it.
Well, very good. I would like some clarification on what would best work for you with regard to, as you refer to it, and aptly so, a site plan. Is this something you require me to hire a company to do more so than what I have? And how then would you want me to present it further than what I possibly have now? Just help me in respect to do what you'd like me to have done.
Yeah, and like I said, this is no disrespect to your application. I understand what you're proposing, and I actually have no problems with it. But no, you don't have to hire anybody special. It can be fairly informal, but it needs to be to scale and needs to represent what is on. I think there's a guideline just depicting what's required, but it's just general information of the building footprint, the fences, location from the property lines, the sidewalks, that kind of thing.
Well, I believe I understand more so what it is you're requiring, and if I might clarify it to make best use of your time, that is then the dimensions of the home, the dimensions of the plot of the property, the location of the sidewalks from each, and is that then more so what you have in mind for me to produce for you?
Yes.
There's also guidelines for applications, if I'm not, and I think Hope can forward that to you, and it's almost like a checklist of things that you must have attached to your application. And again, I agree with Rob. I don't have a problem, but we have to treat everybody the same, and your packet is incomplete, and we have guidelines which are a checklist of items that you must provide, and I think that Hope could forward that to you, and we could see you at the next meeting, and everything will be fine. Along with that, since we're talking about fences, even though you've got a fence and you want to make it a certain height, we also ask for a detailed description of that fence. We know it's going to be wood, but a description of height so that we can also evaluate that.
Okay, well, I think my initial presentation represented the duplication of exactly the fence that was there, again, in the spirit of trying to keep consistent with what had been already there for so long. And obviously I couldn't continue with the fence that was presently there because it was absolutely gone. I think it had been wired in place with a counterbalance of some of the trash in the backyard in order to accomplish it to be there rather than laying on the sidewalk. So with regard to exactly what it is, do you then want me to give you the literal dimensions of the present replacement fence slats that exist exactly as they were? And with that, I think I've probably buttoned up my questions, and I wouldn't want to put on your burden the process of me not having dotted all the I's and T's and presented to you what needs to be, because obviously someone in the future would exploit that. With that said, possibly Hope could help me or someone else in the historic district to present properly what it is you'd like. And then when I ask what would be your next meeting time so that we can move forward with that.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the comments on the site plan, and I apologize I didn't get that. In terms of the outbuilding, you have what you have. There are pictures from Mr. Bowers. The question for the commission is that adequate for this commission, or is this something you're going to be looking for supplemental information by a professional?
There's nothing left to provide supplemental information for. Unfortunately, in the National Register nomination and the district, that outbuilding is shown as a contributing building. Which means it was an important facet of the historic district. It's gone now, and it's gone now because it was torn down without consulting us. There's nothing we can do about that now. I certainly hope that it doesn't become an issue in the district where anybody can come in and buy a piece of property and tear down what they want. Generally, we have requirements for demolition. One of the things that we've usually considered when we have a demolition is what it's going to be replaced with. If the applicant had come before us with a full set of plans, and his intentions, we could have worked through it. We could have made a finding that while it was a contributing element, the shed was deteriorated enough that it was a public safety hazard and could have been torn down. We don't have that now. I agree with Don. We don't have a site plan. And I think that's where we need to go next. Let's see what we need here. I think in your application, Mr. Brower, you do call out replacing the fence with wide pickets and dog ear. If you just put 1x6 dog-eared pickets with 6 feet tall. That's all the specifications we need for the fence. We don't need to duplicate things exactly, but we do need that site plan now. And it's just unfortunate that we lost a element that was considered to be contributing to the historic district. Technically, we should send a letter to the keeper of the register and have that building removed from the designation. I think technically that's what's supposed to happen next, but I may be wrong about that. But that's where I am on the demolition.
In terms of the porch, I put up a picture of the building prior to the work commencing, and the work did commence without permission. I guess I would like direction from the commissioners. Are you looking for architectural drawings, elevations of what it's going to look like? We don't have an original porch. We can, I don't think Mr. Brower has one. Are those windows that are part of that porch character defining? I have a question about that, and I just am curious what information this commission would be looking for in considering the porch.
You know, we get enough of these where we require, this into Windows, my favorite thing here, with Michelle. We require elevations, we require detail so they can be evaluated. We don't care what people do on the inside of these, but we are vastly immersed in the decision-making that goes on the exterior of these buildings. So I think you have to, again, the site plan, if somebody else was coming in the district, we would be asking for elevations and the important detail work. And if the windows are affected, that's how we determine, oh, you can't put that vinyl window in there. You can't use that type of a front on the porch. I mean, I look at what we did with the Curry House, almost a 6-month project for us. So you got to follow the rules. And we have checklists, again, for what has to be submitted when we mess with these buildings. And I know that Hope can forward that on to Mr. Brower, and he'll have that checklist, and he can give us what we need.
We'll move forward with that. The consideration that I gave for the opportunity of the porch to be returned to an open condition was that at some time, I can't tell when, the windows of that home were covered with an aluminum window that was there. And the porch actually has the same windows on it. And I would question whether someone had windows originally on the outside of that patio. Would they have then also put the same aluminum windows that are found to the outside of the home all the way around it as well? That would make me kind of question the fact that the porch was, at the time those windows were done, an open porch.
Yeah, when I drove by there, take a look, it's hard to tell. It very well could be that porch originally was open. Typically in that era, those porches were meant to have removable screens or removable sashes, which that might be what those are. But just by looking at the nature of how it's built, I personally don't think that the porch was enclosed originally. But I'm not, there's no scientific evidence of that for me.
Michelle?
Yes, I was going to ask my colleagues, especially Jed, if he has a historic photo of this house. I feel that this was probably a historic alteration, that porch, and I do want us to spend a little bit more time evaluating it. It's on the facade of the building. It was probably, the stucco was probably applied at the same time that the porch was enclosed with those windows. So I just want us to be able to talk about it. I'd like to see more pictures of the porch prior to partial demo.
Okay, I'd like to add one thing if I might help, and that is that the base of that porch was poured over what I believe is to be rock and dirt. It's a concrete, and that porch has fallen, which was another reason to remove the windows presently, so that we can address what to do with that fallen base of the front porch. Fortunately, the house itself is very solid all the way around, and the structure represents a rock wall that was part of the structure of the home. And if you go through the floor in that forward bedroom, you can find that the back wall of the open porch, which would represent basically the real structure of the home, and those two windows that from that bedroom open onto that porch that still have the metal, that aluminum window treatment that was there. That rock wall limits the access to the flooring that is presently in that porch or under that porch. And that has fallen and cracked, and therefore my interest is in trying to save the front porch and re-pour that concrete and put back into shape that front porch. So that added, if you hadn't had a chance to, with all the other things you're doing, get out, run up on the porch and look. And with the homeless people, I left some furniture there to keep the possibility of them camping for the night out of there. So if you have a chance, you might be able to zip up on the porch and take a look at what I'm speaking of. And I will add then the height of that wall from the ground, from the front, which would be those elevations I believe you're asking me for. And once you're on the porch, although the wall seems to be rather tall from passing on the sidewalk or on the street, really not very tall from the porch structure itself. When you sit there, you're able to converse with the people that are going by and be able to invite them up there for a time away. But, I think if you ask for the elevations, if I provide you with the height of that wall and the height of the flooring, is that going to be more so what we are looking for?
Mr. Brower, and I'll be corrected by anybody here if I say something wrong. It's been modified, and we're not telling you you've got to put it back the way it is. What we're telling you is you've got to give us a drawing so that we can determine if it is compatible with the architecture of the building and of the district that it's in there, and that the character can be maintained. We're not saying you can't make changes. We just have to see them in such a way that it is graphic rather than photos with arrows and some wording on it, or a description that is written or verbal. We need a graphic representation of what you intend to do or what you want to do, and then we can help you out with that.
Yeah, Mr. Brower, I think if you're looking at maybe repouring concrete and things like that inside, what we're going to want in this packet is some detail, including scaled drawings about what you intend to do with that porch.
Yeah, give us something to prove.
Yeah, so that, we know you're going to hammer out the existing concrete and replace it with concrete or wood or whatever. We know if you're just going to remove those posts, that needs to be shown. If you're going to add a post, we need that. We're going to need to know if the existing wall is going to remain or you want to take that out. So I think you need to think your project through a little bit more. And when you decide on what you want to do with that, put it in a set of plans, give it to us, we can review it and discuss it from there.
Mr. Brower, this is Don Smith again. And the other thing, you've now, it appears, crossed the threshold that you're going to be required to obtain a building permit. And you're not going to get a building permit without those drawings. When you start to talk about the structure of the building and pouring concrete, you've now crossed into an area where I believe you're going to have a building permit.
I think that's quite possible, and I know you guys have given me a great deal of your time. Everyone needs to go back home, and the hour's getting late. I will move forward with that and try to satisfy the things that you have spoken to me with. And thank you for the time. And I appreciate it. I hope to be a good part of the neighborhood. And in doing so, we'll move forward and try to provide you with what we have. And by no means do I disrespect what you guys are doing. I'm very pleased that you guys have been there to keep the neighborhood as nice as it is to drive around and enjoy. So I will do what you ask, and we'll carry on.
Okay, and Mr. Brower, I believe the aluminum windows you're referring to are just storm windows that were applied to the exterior of that building.
Yeah, that's probably the best description I could give it as well. Yep.
Is there any other commission member questions or comments?
Do we,
Do we just continue
Just
this
continue.
and not deny, ask for a continuance to the next meeting?
that way he'd just be adding supplemental information, correct? Okay.
Is there any public comment on this item?
I see no public comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Hearing none.
Can I clarify one thing? Just in the fence on the south side, from the house to the southern edge, had been 3 feet, wanted a little higher to block the trash cans and that sort of thing. But actually, I mean, technically, it's well back from the street, whatever, 30-some feet apparently. It could be as tall as the other fence, I presume, right? And solid, same kind of dog-eared wood or whatever, if you wanted that.
Yeah,
So-
he could, whatever his, I think that'd be fine, but he
Yeah,
needs to
okay.
make sure it's on the site plan and called
But
out.
whatever height's appropriate.
6-foot fence or a 4-foot fence or whatever height he wants. Okay, so we'll continue this, Hope. Is that all right, Mr. Brower?
Yeah, and I'm not used to Mr. Brower as much as I am Doug, but I understand formalities. And yes, I think that's great.
Okay, thank you, Doug. And thank you for your time, too. So next item, F, staff
That's been odd.
reports. Go ahead.
I just was going to compliment you and say thank you as well. And, we'll check more diligently with what I need to present than what we have already. I was hoping that, my initial investment in time was with pictures, and of course you guys have done me the favor of driving by to look at it. But we'll get those drawings to you with measurements and et cetera. And hopefully, my ability to draw ends at, the end of the ruler. I don't do as well as many of the artists out there, so I was hoping a picture would help me out in that. But I can acquire the information you ask for so that it covers you in future issues to arise.
Okay, thank you. Next item is F, staff reports. F1, discussion only. Hope.
Okay, since your last meeting, the chair has approved 5 different applications. 2 are re-roofs. 1 was a tree removal, 1 was a masonry wall, and there were some storage sheds. Also, and Michelle's on, but Michelle mentioned to me a lot of people are doing the scavenger hunt, so that's exciting. We're starting to get the entries in. And I know Luann and Greg and Jed, you all worked on that, and Jed was able to talk to the folks at the Fox Brew Pub, and they've donated the gift card for the winner, so that we're really appreciative to Jim Phelan for doing that. And, I think it's great. And on Monday, Mike and the mayor will be giving the award to the Brennemans at the Bliss Mansion. And that will be videotaped because of the social distancing and no more than 10 people in a room. We haven't been able to have them come to the meeting without people having to leave the meeting. So we'll just do it on site and show the board a videotape. That's it.
Thank you, Hope. Are there any commission member reports or comments?
With Adele's going down, I guess they saved one of the windows out of the upper floor for the Historical Society. And Frank Lepori, I guess he was working with a builder or house builder up in Tahoe to save the rest of the windows. They took the top part down by hand. And Frank Lepori also saved for another one of his projects all the sandstone. So the sandstone foundation did not end up in the landfill. So there's, some of it will still continue to live on.
At least didn't go to a winery in Napa. Any other commission member reports? Future agenda items? I guess we'll just wait and see what floats in. Any public comment? If
I see no public comment, Mr. Chair.
there is none, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned unanimously. Thank you.
You know what?